the second you get hurt as a snowboarder, you start thinking about, okay, how long does it take to recover and how long till I get back snowboarding? Shoulder surgery, knee surgery, broken arms, ankles, wrists, ribs, pelvis, tailbone, spleen. And I think I'm pretty lucky, actually, compared to others.
So why did you keep going?
That's a great question.
Craig McMorris is one of Canada's most respected riders.
He's a former Canadian national snowboard team member, host of Canada's Ultimate Challenge, and is also an Olympic analyst.
My little brother is like the most successful snowboarder of all time. I've won X Games medals, but I was never like the best.
There's going to be parts of you that would have looked at his success and said to yourself, I wish I could have had that.
It was never about winning those contests for me. My ambition was I want to film the best video part that I can.
Broadcasting the Olympics to an entire country.
There's nothing more terrifying than being on air and not talking.
What's the biggest lesson you've learned from your parents? We find it very interesting that the majority of you who watch and listen to this show aren't yet subscribed to our channels across Spotify, Apple, YouTube. It would mean the world to us if you can do us that small kindness. It allows us to continue to bring on amazing guests week after week and continue to provide you with amazing value and content. It's the only thing we'll ever ask of you. If you can hit that follow or subscribe button, it would mean the world to us. Thank you so much and enjoy the episode. Craig, welcome to Gent Talk.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm really excited to have this conversation. You're the first snowboarder.
Really?
Yes.
Olympic athletes on here though, right?
I've had Olympic athletes. I've had a volleyball player. I've had another volleyball player. I've had a cyclist. First snowboarder though.
Okay. Who's the most talkative out of them?
Ooh. None of them.
Okay.
I'm hoping
Story checks out.
Yeah.
Story checks out here.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, it's funny when I think about it, you know, they're talkative. They answer questions, but you're already a lot more talkative. So, so this is good. We're starting off great.
Perfect.
But for people who, you know, they see the stuff snowboarders do, it all looks wild. It all looks cool, but they don't really know what the life of a snowboarder is actually like. Right? They just think, oh, you know, on the weekends I go up to the mountain, I go snowboarding and skiing, but you just get to do it professionally. Cool. But what's life really like?
I mean, you know, it's funny you say that. That really struck me with the story my mom would always say when me and my little brother were growing up, and she'd have so many friends that would be like, well, why did Mark and Craig quit hockey? And she's like, well, they're snowboarding. And then all the parents would be like, yeah, my kid snowboards too. Like they go on the weekend. So just you mentioning that really brought it back to me. But it's I mean, think of every Canadian hockey player, how much they apply themselves to their craft to get to the highest possible level they can. Snowboarding is the exact same, right? We spent every waking moment thinking it, watching it, breathing it. Growing up in Regina, Saskatchewan, flattest place in the world, not tons of snowboarding. Yeah. We're skateboarding, we're jumping on the trampoline, we're wakeboarding. It's just constantly applying yourself to an end goal that almost seems impossible, but as you get a little bit older, it kind of becomes possible. Man. So that's kind of like the youngest stage of maybe a snowboarding career. How
bad is it on the knees?
On the knees, it's just bad on the body. Let's just be honest here. It's tough on the body. Yeah. You like it's the same as everything. You know, 10,000 hour rule. You got to do it. You got to do it to the highest level every day. Hopefully, getting 1% better. But I've blown my knee. I've compound fractured my leg. Shoulder surgery, knee surgery, broken arms, ankles, wrists, ribs, pelvis, tailbone, spleen. Done it all. And I think I'm pretty lucky actually compared to others. So there's a price tag that you have to pay if you want to get that good.
So why did you keep going with all of these injuries?
There's a really famous snowboarder named J.P. Walker who he has this quote. It's like kind of cheesy, but at the start of this movie, one of my favorite video parts to watch of all time, he was like, I got hurt and then I thought, I don't know. It's like I can't remember the quote. I just messed up so terribly. But it was essentially to the effect of like, the second you get hurt as a snowboarder, you start thinking about, okay, how long does it take to recover and how long till I get back snowboarding? Is usually one of your first thoughts. So it's almost like there's never that time of like, oh, I should like hang it up or like I should get out of this. It's like, no, how can I get back on my snowboard and how can I like learn from this? And learning, I think, is the biggest word there, because it has taught me the most. I think is recovering from injury in my snowboarding career has taught me the most about literally every life lesson I think you can learn of, like.
What has it taught you? Because I think there's so many people out there who, even if they're not professional athletes or athletes in general, who've sustained an injury of some kind. You know, there's a mental grind and a mental resilience they have to develop afterwards to continue in their life.
Yep.
What was the lesson that you learned there?
When you're young, so my first surgery was a shoulder surgery. And when you're young, you think you're invincible. Everybody thinks they're invincible, especially if you're like a pro snowboarder that thinks they're hot stuff. Like, you think you're invincible, and then you get smoked, and then you're like, whoa, okay, I'm not invincible.
Yeah.
Got shoulder surgery, and I didn't do my I was like, yeah, you do like your rehab, but doing rehab as a professional athlete is like a little bit different, I think, in terms of like, yeah, you get back to an ability where you can move and function throughout the day, but then there's getting back to like, am I in like the best shape? I am the strongest. Can I take another hit like that? So when I was young, I got the shoulder surgery. Then I went and worked on a ranch, kind of as like a part-time job, before the season started, and I kind of forgot about my rehab, if you will, physiotherapy, and then like a couple years down the line, that surgery kind of like fell apart, and my shoulder still like dislocated and stuff like that, and it really showed me for my knee surgery, like a couple years after that, it's like, you got to do the work. You have to put in the work if you ever want to get better, or else you're just going to pay that price and your body's not going to like you. Makes snowboarding hard.
Yeah, no, sounds like it. And I'm actually dealing with some shoulder pain right now that I just keep putting off. I'm like, I really should get that checked out.
Yeah.
And I think also too, as guys, we tend to just go, I'll fight through the pain. Somehow it'll make me tougher.
Yeah.
And even
never does.
Never
ever does.
No. Until you're sleeping on your shoulder and you wake up in the middle of the night in pain. You're like, this isn't right.
No.
How did you you have to be in peak physique form. Mm-hmm. What does that look like?
I think.
You did one of these.
Yeah,
Why?
you kind of do. I mean, snowboarding is like kind of. Yes, you do have to be in good shape, but you don't have to be in. Like, I compare it to a running back in the NFL. They have to be in like 0.0% body fat. Like, there's like a tangible. If you're running faster, you're probably a better running back. Where in snowboarding, if you're really comfortable in your body and you have that skill and stuff like that. Let's say you can bench a little bit more, it's not going to make you a better snowboarder. You know, like, you have to be in a certain amount of shape and you have to be able to take slams and recover fast. But if you can squat, 250 or 275, that's no difference, right? Does that make sense? Like, it's not that high performance kind of training. It's more of just training, but it's changed so much. When I started snowboarding, like, the people that worked out were considered like jocks, and you just like we didn't mess with them, so, but now like the level that I'm riding at and then that most people are riding at now, you have to be in a lot more shape, Can't be smoking cigarettes at the top of the pipe,
No. I mean, I remember seeing videos and clips of hockey players smoking cigarettes and drinking beer in the dressing room between periods.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I don't know how you did that. But it's wild.
Yeah. It's like, okay, we're going to go do the third now. You're like, I'm going to take 5.
Hold on, I'm almost done.
I need a map.
Yeah. So you still had to be in good shape.
Yeah, you got to be in good shape.
So how did you maintain that physique, the nutrition? How did you maintain those? What does that look like for someone that was at your caliber of sport?
I mean, currently now, like, I'd still say, like, I'm definitely more in the prime of my career, like, filming wise right now. So I feel like, and it's kind of different when you compete, usually a little bit younger. And then like filming backcountry or in the streets and that kind of style of snowboarding is usually a little bit older. And that's kind of what I'm in. It's a learning process. You have to enjoy your life as well. Sometimes I was a little bit guilty of like, okay, this is the diet and this is how much I'm going to work out. And then you like burn yourself out, or it's like not be enjoying your life. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So there's like kind of a balance, I think, is what I really, really learned in terms of like how much you apply yourself. Do it so you get better, but also so you enjoy it still. Because once you treat snowboarding as a job or anything as a career, like I look around, like, you've built an incredible show and all this kind of stuff, but if you lean too hard into that, like, the worst thing is like waking up and not wanting to go do it. Does that make sense? So that's where I've, like, as I've gotten a little bit older, has learned that balance is crazy important, and it took me a long time.
It makes me think of I can't remember when this was, but Steve Yzerman, who's a legendary hockey player, GM.
Yep.
He once said to a reporter that his summers were off limits to hockey
Mm-hmm.
He would not think about hockey. He would not talk about hockey. He would not play hockey. And the reason for that was to maintain, to what you just said, the enjoyment of it when he's in the season, but also the importance of actually having something that's separate from the thing that makes you who you are.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Did you ever struggle with the identity piece of, you're just known as a snowboarder, but there's more to you?
That's a really good question. I don't think I did, because I was never good enough where I was like the golden boy.
Okay.
Like I was always like kind of scratching and clawing my way into a career, like competing. The reason I became a broadcaster of snowboarding and for the Olympics and all that kind of stuff was I was competing for the 4th and final spot at the Olympics for Sochi 2014. A guy named Charles Reed. And I kind of was like, look back, I'm like, I don't truly, like, if I make the team, I'm still gonna, like, I'm not that excited, That's like a red flag. You should be super excited. You should be like, that should be the ultimate goal.
Sure.
So then I was like, oh, well, who's broadcasting it? And they said nobody yet. We're doing some like auditions. So I threw my name in that hat and I got that job. But it was like kind of diversifying myself a little bit and like figuring that out, and not just only being known for a snowboarder. I feel like I provide so much more value to the brands that I ride for now. Is I can show up and I can speak, or I can broadcast, or I can snowboard, or I can do all that kind of stuff. So I think diversifying it and not only being known as a snowboarder. But when you're young, you have to almost, because you have to live and breathe. You have to have those days where you like go up the hill for the first chair and people are dragging you off the hill, right? But then as you get a little bit older, you have to be a little bit more selective of your time and make sure you still enjoy it and love it. I like that. That Stevie Y story is incredible. You know, like, yeah.
It stuck with me from the day I've heard
good.
it. I think this must have been years ago, but it stuck with me because it always reminded me that even with this podcast and no matter what else I'm doing, I need to have those breaks from the thing I'm doing. Otherwise, it's no longer enjoyable.
Yes, that's exactly it. Have you felt burnt out? Because you've been doing this for 2 years now, like roughly?
Just over 2 years, and there have been moments.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that stems from what people don't see. And I think you can probably understand that just as much as, in the same way people see you when you're on the hill, they don't see the work that you put in to get there and the work you have to do afterwards. And then the mental resilience you have to develop to come back tomorrow and the day after and all those different things. And there's so much, like what people will see from this conversation is a nice little screen and two guys talking. What they won't see is the work that went into making it happen, the work that happens afterwards to put the little video together and all those things. And that can be very consuming sometimes and very tiresome.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. It's the tedious parts of like any job. That's, you said it brilliantly, where like pro snowboarding is very glamorous. There's lots of really, really fun things and that look really cool. But then there's, as we mentioned off the top, the injuries or just kind of that battle of like getting better or always questioning where you are in the industry and am I getting what I deserve and all that kind of stuff. There's all those little things. So I think...
Did you ever struggle with that?
Oh yeah, all the time, I think. Because I wasn't the best. Like I never won an Olympic gold medal, or I've won X Games medals, but I was never like the best slopestyle or big air snowboarder, right? So,
well, you said you weren't the golden child.
No, and especially because my little brother is like the most successful snowboarder of all time. He's got the most X Games medals of any winter athlete, and I'm still in there because we're the siblings with the most. I've got one, and he's got 25, I think. So, you know what I'm saying? It's like the Gretzky brothers in the NHL points race. But it was more like, so I mean, I kind of question that. But as you get older, like you just kind of go into that confident, like you grow into yourself and your confidence and find your place. Just like I feel like any person in any industry, it's always like figuring out where you are and stuff like that. I find this diversification of like my career is what actually really, because like it's so hypersensitized now. Like if I could nerd out on snowboarding for a second, there's people that just snowboard on rails in videos, and there's people that just snowboard in the backcountry in videos, and there's people that just do half pipe, and I kind of do backcountry and I do rails and I ride park. I try to do everything at like the highest possible level. Try and be like an all-terrain vehicle, and then like the sports broadcasting. So I think that the diversification of my career has been the biggest like thumbs up, honestly.
You mentioned your brother Mark. And he's the younger brother.
Correct.
So you obviously started the journey. And he took up the mantle and sounds like ran with it.
Yeah.
To some degree, there's going to be parts of you that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that would have looked at his success and said to yourself, I wish I could have had that.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's not coming from a malicious place. It's just the way humans are. How often had that happen to you, and how did you sort of, you could be happy for him, but also sad for yourself?
Yeah, I think so as I mentioned about like the different aspects of snowboarding, like I did the slopes on big air and the contests so I could get my name big enough so I could go and be in movies and film projects. It was never about winning those contests for me. That was not my like passion. Like deep down, I'd ask myself, like, okay, I know to win this contest, I have to do these tricks. I don't really want it. Like, that's not my thing, you know?
Yeah.
Where my brother was the exact opposite. He was like inventing those tricks and doing that kind of stuff and was so hungry for that style and that kind of snowboarding.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a different career path. Obviously, that one is definitely more lucrative. So there's that kind of stuff. But I've been fortunate enough to like, I just kind of got lucky in terms of not, if I wanted that exact same thing, I could see myself getting way more jealous, but that's not really what I wanted.
Okay.
I was kind of chasing this thing over here.
Yep.
And I kind of like, I was the one broadcasting every single one of his Olympic medals and almost every single one of his X Games medals. Like I was
What
the
was
one
that like?
doing the call. And that's where I think the jealousy doesn't really come in because I'm just watching snowboarding, you know, like
Right.
I've watched a million snowboard runs in my life. So it's just another run. And it's like, yeah, people are like, well, how do you stay, like non-bipartisan or like, you know, like how do you not
Unbiased
be a homer?
to it,
Yeah. And it's just like, I'm just watching snowboarding. Like good snowboarding is good snowboarding and bad snowboarding is bad snowboarding. So I'm just calling it like I see it. So I think that, very long-winded answer to your question. Great question, by the way. But it's just like two different peaks that we were chasing. You know?
Right.
So I don't think I got, like, obviously maybe I'm a super jealous. I don't know. Maybe just
hiding it
push
really
it all
well.
down, guys. That's all you have to do.
Okay, so I want to talk about mental resilience here.
Okay.
Because when you're a professional athlete, and I understand and I hear you when you say, you know, you had very different career aspirations. Like you were in it for different reasons, not for wrong reasons, but just different reasons. Which almost makes that more interesting to ask this question, because that meant, like in your brother's scenario, if he got injured, he knows that he needs to heal himself so that he can pursue what he's after. You're doing something for a different reason. So when you got injured here, how did you get yourself off the mat and go, okay, I got to heal, I got to work, knowing full well the ambition isn't still here really, it's somewhere else?
So like, let's just, his ambition was, you know, win X Games gold medal, win the Olympics.
Yep.
Like that's a contest. It's a snowboard contest. You show up on the weekend. My ambition was I want to film the best video part that I can. And that's usually a full body of work over the season. So when you're hurt, you're not riding at that level, even close, right? So that's kind of where that was my little carrot in front of me, is like, I want to be able to film the best video part I can. So when I'm hurt, I have to like do the rehab and you have to put in the work to get back. So just like, that was the motivation, I guess, for me, to answer your question. It was very different, you know?
And as someone who spends a lot of time watching people at their peak, competing at the highest possible level, what separates those people from others? What is it that they have that makes them not just skill and talent wise, but there's something else that they have to have in order to get to that level?
Yeah. I'm going to use my brother again. We call him the closer, probably one of the best snowboarders at landing under pressure, right? It's always the third and final run. It's always do or die, you know, last chance qualifier, whatever you have. Mark, for some reason, will always land. And you can argue and say, like, especially, like, he's 31 now. Like, he's older than a lot of the other competitors. They're like 20 and 21. And he's still, like, he's still hanging. Like, he was silver at X Games this year. He's probably going to make the Olympic team. He just has that, like, I'm going to land it, like, just that tenacity, I think. Because it's very nerve-wracking. Like, you're doing something really scary, so you can hurt yourself. And then the added pressure of, like, this is a last run, or this is the X Games final, or something like that. I wish you could bottle it up. You know, like, every great athlete, like, I don't know how, it's absolutely wild, you know? His ability to land on like the most high pressure situations, and look at those young kids who can do maybe tricks that are slightly better, but they just never. It's just not there. It's not there like it is with Mark, or I don't know. You compare it to like, you know, the way like Tiger could lock in and just be like, no, he's not losing today. You know, like that. I don't know, that killer instinct, I guess, for lack of a better term. I don't know how you do it.
Have you seen, or what have you seen from athletes who crumble in those scenarios? What happens there?
I don't know. That's a hard one too. I think most people who do crumble from those kind of situations, they just haven't been there enough. Mark has been in that situation so many times, right? All 3 Olympics, countless X Games. You know, I used Tiger as an example recently. He's been in on Sunday in contention a bajillion times. You know, I think there's that quote, "Pressure's a privilege." You know, like it's not a right.
I haven't heard that before.
Okay, I don't want to give it to my brother, but he's the first person I heard say that. So somebody help me online here in the comments. Tell me somebody else said it first. Pressure's a privilege, and that's where like you're. Like you've been in that situation a bunch, so you know how your body reacts and what you have to do. Because it's like, I don't know, I don't know if you ever get nervous or feel pressure in anything, but everybody reacts in like super different ways. Like some people get irritable, some people get giggly, some people get a stomach ache, some people...
I find I work better under pressure.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
In fact, I find I work so much better under pressure that when I don't have anything to pressure me, I don't perform as well, do as well. Stakes are not high. I subconsciously maybe don't treat it as importantly.
Don't care. Yeah, okay. Yeah, no, that makes total sense. Do you ever get, like, how do you perform when you're nervous? Like, do you ever get scared of, like, I don't know, anything in your work, if anything, like, scares you or, like, kind of nerve-wracking?
I did a TED Talk, not this past January, the January prior, so 2023. Okay. And I thought I was going to be speaking at about 6 p.m. that evening. Okay. And I couldn't eat the whole day.
Okay.
So
here we go.
I was in my mind.
Yep.
Drank a lot of water, so I was going to the bathroom quite a bit. But I couldn't really eat. I had snacks that I had prepared. Just looked at them.
Just stared.
Yeah. And then I didn't end up speaking until 9 p.m. It just went so late.
Yeah.
And as I'm being mic'd up and ready to go on, still just like the nerves. But then as soon as I hit the stage and as soon as I stood there, I took a deep breath, locked in.
Yeah.
And
that's
then,
so nice.
Yeah. But it also taught me this really interesting thing. It taught me that when I prepare for something that's so high pressured like that, I'm able to perform at that level. Mm-hmm. But it's also, on the flip side, shown me that when I don't prepare for something, it really highlights how underprepared I am.
Okay.
At least to me.
Yeah.
Right? I've been able to fool people. But for me, I'm like, wow, I don't know how I did that. But
Yeah. Okay, that's super interesting. Yeah.
What about you?
The nervousness of not eating is very interesting, because I feel like when I'm nervous, I just eat a ton. Let's go get coffees. Let's go eat some lunch. We just had lunch. Let's go have another one. You know, like that kind of, just something to take my mind off of it, because I don't know. Yeah, that's kind of funny.
Yeah, see, I can't take my mind off the thing.
It keeps going a little bit. Yeah.
And if anything, knowing that I'm trying to distract it is only fueling it, because I know what I'm trying to do. Yeah. So I'd rather lean into it and just go, all right, I'm nervous about this. I'm going to try to work my way out of it somehow, versus trying to like distract with something else, because I know like at a physiological level, I'm still feeling it. I feel it in my stomach. I could feel it. My hands are getting a little sweaty. Yeah. I could be talking to you right now, and if I'm nervous about something else, you can bet it's going off right now.
Yeah. Okay, that's so interesting. That you said that was 2 years ago.
2 years ago.
Would you feel the same nerves now after you've done this podcast for 2 years? Because you're a very good speaker.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Nerves for a podcast episode?
No, doing a TED Talk again. Yeah.
I delivered a talk in November to a family foundation that specializes in supporting victims of abuse.
Okay.
And they asked me to come in and talk about how modern masculinity shapes boys in certain ways to suppress emotions, and so they become aggressors because they don't understand how to communicate effectively.
Yes.
And I was in a room with doctors, psychiatrists, experts, And that made me nervous.
That's terrifying.
Because,
just hearing that right now. There's a lot of smart people.
Because I knew standing up on that stage, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychiatrist, and I'm being asked to talk about a topic that presumably these people have spent thousands of hours researching, investigating, writing reports on.
Terrifying.
Absolutely. And I was nervous for that.
Yeah.
And I believe it hindered my performance. The organizer came to me afterwards and said that was great. At a subconscious level, I knew. So that's an example. I knew, for example, that was not nearly as good as the TED Talk, because I didn't feel as prepared for it, because I let who the audience was get into my head.
Okay.
And so I've learned from that experience that it doesn't matter who's in the audience, because you've been asked to be there.
Yep.
And you would not have been asked to be there unless there was a reason to be there. And that part was self-doubt flooding in. And I can imagine there's been times for yourself where, as you know, you're going up to do something, it's like, can I do this?
Oh my gosh.
Last time I did this, I hurt myself.
Yes. That's literally, though, that is the internal dialogue for so much of snowboarding. Like, I was filming, we've been in like Eastern Canada, and we're filming a video, and when you're filming, you're trying to find spots that nobody's really ever snowboarded on, and that usually means they're big and they're scary and there's high danger and high risk, and you're trying to do, not only just ride the spot, but you're trying to do something like, what is the absolute, just the edge of my possibility, capability, like, can I do this? That's where you're like, every day you're questioning yourself, and there's like truly fear of like getting hurt, and then also like, can I possibly do this? So that conversation, that internal conversation of just like really working yourself up to like even be able to try to hit the feature, and then try the trick you want, and then put yourself in a position to land that trick, that all the time is that internal dialogue. The older I've gotten, though, the better I understand my snowboarding. So before, when I was younger, I just throw myself into the pavement until I either landed or didn't. And now I kind of realize, I'm like, oh, I'm capable of this. Like, I know, I figured this out. It's all a puzzle every time you're trying to get a shot, and I can solve the puzzle usually a lot faster than I used to be able to. So, but that internal dialogue is terrifying. So would you have changed your speed? You said, I thought it was really interesting is the people in the crowd, but you wouldn't have changed what you said if, it wasn't all doctors, right? Like,
no. And it's funny because when I was crafting that talk, I intentionally, here's the interesting part. I actually wrote in the talk, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychiatrist. Okay. I called it out.
Yeah.
And I wonder now, as we're talking, whether I did that for like a defense move.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
I hear you exactly.
Like,
that makes
just
so
in
much
case,
sense.
everybody, like, I just want to preface, like, I'm not a psychiatrist. So, like, if I say something that you're like, hey, actually, the research shows that, you don't, like, hold me to it.
Yes, exactly. Like, I can make a mistake now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like,
I've given myself a little bit of a runway there.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's fine. That was a great question, because it actually forced me to think about that just now. And I don't think I've thought about it in that way before.
It's always funny when you're talking in publicly. Like, sometimes I'll like, see somebody in the crowd. I'm like, oh, what are you going to change now? Like, come on, you were going to say, you had a point to make up there. That's why you were speaking. So
the other thing that I try to use technique wise is, if you're hearing me talk for the first time and I miss something, mess it up, the only person that really knows that is me.
Oh yeah.
And so instead of just panicking and being like, oh shoot, sorry, I didn't, like, I messed up, you just keep going.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that had happened to me on, in a number of different scenarios where I'm doing a talk of some kind, and I just kept going, and the audience was none the wiser, because they don't actually know it's like when you're watching a film, you don't know what the outcome is.
Yeah, you don't know. I do tons of live TV. Did live TV every single night for the Olympics, and it's so funny because you'll finish like a hit and just be so bummed on yourself because you made one mistake. Not one person in the audience noticed that mistake.
Yeah.
Like, nobody noticed the mistake other than you, and you just like beat yourself up over it. It's so funny when you're like, the audience doesn't know.
Yeah. I mean, is there a different type of pressure that comes with broadcasting the Olympics to an entire country?
I don't think so. It's literally sports. It's the most fun thing in the world, I think. You can put pressure on yourself. I think you don't need to do that. Obviously, like, you want to do a good job and you want to do it right, but you're talking about sports. Like, this is entertainment at the end of the day. We're not curing cancer.
Fair.
I wish I could, but that's what I try to tell myself whenever it's like it's prime time, the lights are all on and you're getting that like 5, 4, 3. You know, it's like people are tuning in to have fun and watch sports and be entertained. So be entertaining, you know? Yeah. That's kind of my approach.
Do you find when you're in that position and you deliver a broadcast and you're done and you kind of get hard on yourself, what do you take away from that for the next time you're back on? Because in the scenarios where you're like, oh, I messed that up, and then you realize, okay, well, you know what? Nobody even noticed. And then there's moments where you didn't necessarily mess something up, but you didn't give it your 100%, which is hard to do. Like even I notice sometimes when I'm in the studio, I try to pay attention to my energy levels. How was my sleep? How was the day before? How was my morning? What do I have coming up? Because that affects how I am sitting across from you.
Yes.
And I try to make sure that I'm doing you a service by showing up as my best self. I imagine it's the same for you, trying to do a service to your audience to show up as your best self.
Yeah, you really like sleep, time. There's a wonderful quote. Bob Babinski is it's a great friend of mine. He's helped me a lot in my broadcast career. And one thing that I really learned is sometimes TV personalities get accused of being like divas a little bit, but it's usually them protecting their time so that when they're on air,
they're on
100% energy. This is awesome. Like I feel I'm firing at all cylinders, you know? There's nothing worse. Like I used to kind of like almost study too much, take in way too much information, be there way too early or way too long. And then when you're on air, you're just like a little flat or a little tired or you're just not thinking that fast. Which is, I mean, good way to learn for sure. But that's one thing I've kind of taken away is you got to protect your time. So you show up in like the best version of yourself and you're having fun too. It's back to that first conversation we had. Like I feel the best when I'm having a ton of fun and confidence on air. The second you lose your confidence, it's a scary place to be, you know? And I could see that with podcasting as well. If you're confident and you're like, I know what I'm going to ask this guest. I know where I want to take this, as opposed to like, I hope we find something kind of interesting here or else this is going to be a long hour.
Yeah, well, you know what's interesting is I said to you right off the top here before we started recording, like we don't script these conversations. No. And so there have been moments where I feed off of you because my goal as the host here is to basically just, you do the talking. I'm here to listen to you talk. And then in scenarios where you don't give me anything, I'm like, oh boy, I'm going to have to start pulling in some stories and thinking about some things. And there's been moments where that's happened where it's thrown me off because I'm like, oh, okay. It's definitely taught me how to be a lot more present because just like everybody else, there's stuff that's going on up here, right? Today there's a snowstorm in Toronto. I'm thinking about how crappy the roads are. I got in and I'm like, I'm good. And then there's scenarios where if, let's say, you're sitting there and if you gave me nothing to work with, I have to feed off you. So now I got to carry the conversation when my goal always is to basically spotlight you, the guest. Do you find as a broadcaster when that happens? Or actually, you know what? More specifically, because you're broadcasting in a team, when one of your teammates is feeling flat, not confident, no energy, you've got to pick up that slack.
Yep.
How do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, it's the hardest is when you're broadcasting or calling something that you're just not that interested in, you know, like that, or it's just like not an exciting game. But I think I've realized when I first started, when I was younger, it was very like, let's have tons of energy, let's be loud, let's, you know, be entertaining. But sometimes it's not entertaining. Yeah. It's a boring game. It's a blowout. You have to match the energy of what's on screen. That's something that took me a little while to learn. And also, so matching that energy on screen, or matching, like, if it's more of a somber story, like kind of coming down a little bit, or if it's an exciting story, kind of bringing it up a little bit. Like, I don't know, like if you play in a band, everybody's like on the same tempo and matching. Yeah. That's where I think, like, that's what I've learned in broadcasting. But yeah, you got to be firing quick to realize what's coming and how to match that energy.
There's an interesting thread here that I want to pull on, because what's fun, and sort of just to point out exactly how, you know, an example of our conversation here is, I thought we were going to be talking a lot about snowboarding, and here we are talking about broadcasting. But more specifically, what we're talking about is storytelling. Mm-hmm. You know, there's going to be people who are listening and watching this who have to present something at work, or they have to tell a story, or maybe they're a speaker, or they aspire to be a speaker, broadcaster, whatever. Mm-hmm. What's the key ingredient to making you a good storyteller? Because you just pinpointed some pieces there of, you want to match what's happening. What works for you? What's been the key thing? Maybe you've seen someone in your industry that you're like, they do it perfectly and this is the recipe to it.
That's a great question. We're going to break this down in two parts. For broadcasting, watching live sport, the thing that I think is the best storytelling is setting up. The viewer should know the most pertinent information, and then silent, like letting it breathe is the term we use in broadcasting, letting it breathe, and watching, like hearing the sounds of, let's say it's a hockey game, hearing skate and puck and maybe a little yelling, like that on ice volume, and then only injecting yourself in the absolute most important time for like one nugget of information that makes what you just saw really relevant. Like setting stakes constantly and then letting what's on the screen unfold. And I think in storytelling it's the exact same, where set stakes, make it interesting. I also think being authentic. A lot of people have a certain cadence in the way they talk, and sometimes when they're telling a story they change that. So I think like being really genuinely yourself and telling the story is usually, I don't know, more entertaining. I don't know if that makes any sense at all.
No, it does, absolutely.
Okay.
I was talking to another speaker, and I noticed a trend where they changed the cadence of their voice. They kind of like perk up a little bit when they start talking.
Yeah.
And it felt and sounded disingenuous.
Yes.
Because as someone listening to it, I was like, that's not.
What is
that?
You're broadcasting now.
Yeah, like you're projecting something.
Yes.
And the pause piece, I think, is a powerful tool. I learned that during the TED Talk. As I was preparing it, I was working with a coach at the time, and she had said to me, like, leave room. She didn't say to breathe, but that's essentially what she was saying. Like, leave room for the word you just dropped to sit with the audience. And that pause is like half a second, but it will feel like half a minute. It'll feel forever. And there's a trick and a powerful tool there in storytelling to bring the audience with you and then just leave them hanging for a moment.
There's nothing more terrifying than being on air and not talking, right? When they say action or go or to you when you think you got to talk, but like some of the best broadcasters in the world can sit in silence for like 15, 20 seconds with the audience and then pick it up perfectly at the next time, like right at the turn or right when the audience is almost going to lose interest, hit them with another nugget. And, that's actually really interesting. Like I think silence, space is one of the most important things that gets often overlooked in storytelling and broadcasting.
What was the hardest thing for you to learn?
Hardest thing for me to learn, that I don't think I could pick one. I like to mirror my snowboard career to my like broadcasting and media career in terms of like do everything, diversify as much as you possibly can, because you never know what is like actually going to hit, right? So I don't know.
Was there something that stood out that just made it difficult for you, that you're like, you had to maybe unlearn something that you were doing to learn this new way? Or was there something that you saw someone else do that you're like, wow, that's a powerful tool, I want to learn that?
I think listening.
That's a hard one.
Listening, like really like listening to an interview. Because sometimes, I don't know if you come in with a direction or questions and then somebody will say something and you're like, that's way more interesting than what I had. Let's go that way, But sometimes if you're so focused on what you are going to say, you actually don't hear what they're going to say. So I think listening is definitely one, like that's the most important.
Listening is a skill.
It's so hard. Yeah.
Because to your point, I could have come in here saying, okay, I've got some themes in my head. I want to talk about snowboarding. And you're telling me how, your goal and focus became in the broadcasting side, the storytelling angle and all those things. And I'm just completely ignoring it because in my mind, I'm like, I'm only hearing the stuff I want to hear about the snowboarding instead of listening to you and going, oh, that's actually really interesting. Let's dive into that.
You're a great listener. I feel like we've gotten a bunch of different directions. But yeah, no, I think the more you do it, the easier it is to listen. I don't know if you found this with the podcast though. Like it's all, we talked about it with Mark and pressures of privilege and being there a bunch. Like the more you're doing this, the easier it is to listen, formulate a path forward, all that kind of stuff all at once. Do you find that?
At times, yeah. At times I find sometimes you'll say something, or a guest will say something to me that's got so much in there that I'm now thinking, okay, I can literally dedicate a segment of the conversation to 3 different things.
Yeah.
And no matter which one I go with, I still got to remember to come back to these. But at the same time, I still have to be present with you in case you say something else. And because that's not scripted, I'm not writing notes down as you talk. They're like, hey, come back to this.
Yeah.
It's a balancing act. And I've also had to learn to just let go of certain things. It's like, hey, it would have been interesting to talk about these things, but we haven't been able to because you've just given me new information. But I've learned just through this exchange, right, through the conversations that I have in this room, it's taught me how to be more present in conversations outside of this room. It's a skill set that I struggled with that it's taught me, because you really do have to be present to what's happening in front of you in order to really listen to it. If your phone is going off, if the TV is on, the radio is on, someone's talking to you, something happens over there, all of that is so distracting. It's also partly why, and I don't know if I've ever said this on air, why we don't let anyone else sit in the room when we're having this conversation. Because I don't want you to be distracted by, hey, was I supposed to say that, not say that? You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. There's if you're just audio only, it's all black in the room. It's one water glass on the table. It's very simple, which I've kind of like, because it doesn't feel like there's a safety net, or I can look around or do something. I kind of like it's very in front of you, which is you set it up very brilliantly.
Thank you. I wish I could take credit. The studio is designed the way it is, and it's a fantastic space, because there's also a TV screen here that people don't see. Yeah. And the TV is intentionally off because I don't want you looking at yourself and adjusting yourself every time you say something.
Okay, that makes so much sense. When we went to air, the TV shut off, and I was like, oh. Bye.
But those are all distractions.
100%.
Yeah. And it reminds me too, when speaking, you know, another lesson that I was taught was pick 3 points in the room, usually 3 people. Separate them so that your head is actually turning, and focus on just talk to those 3 people.
Like when you're doing live, like big, yeah.
Because then you're not distracted by a new face, someone moving, someone doing something else. It's the same 3 people, and they won't know.
No.
Right? Like you'll look at them briefly, you say something to the person there, then you say something to the other person. They won't realize what you're doing, but that's something that I've learned.
That's a great tip. Yeah, 3 separate people across the room, and you got that head movement.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It looks like it's organic.
Yeah.
And also staying still is a hard one. I imagine as a broadcaster, someone who's on television, you have when you're on a stage, there's flexibility and movement. When you're on television, you're kind of limited to stay within frame.
Stay on your mark. Yeah. You got to, and under the light and stuff like that, like find the light. So
what works for you there?
You can be hands, but you can't be like feet. You can like, sell it with your hands, and if it's a big thing, be big, and if it's a small thing, be small. But just, no line dancing over there.
Well, I imagine that there's a lesson in there too, because for anyone who's interested in speaking or even doing a presentation at work, you don't want to incorporate too much movement. No. It's distracting.
Yep, for sure. I think balance, is really important on that one, because you've probably seen the people that talk and they just don't even move anything.
It's awkward. It's hard to watch. It's uncomfortable. When was the last time you bombed a broadcast or a conversation or a segment where you're just like, that was awful in every sense of the word?
I've had 2 major bombs in my life. One was a speaking engagement to, can't even remember who it was, but I was in Europe. They had it, so I'd get back and I'd have 3 days. It was in Whistler where I live, and I was gonna have 3 days to prepare, and I'd get my suit, and I'd get like all this stuff. I fly back from Europe, I land, and I just see my phone blowing up, and it's like, hey, where are you? Like all this stuff. They changed the date, and nobody told me. Probably like 3 hours after I landed from flying from Frankfurt to Vancouver.
Oh geez.
Yeah. So then I just like race up, and I'm like, all right, let's try. Worst motivational speech of my life. Just the most haggard person wearing like a non-dry clean suit, just trying to, pump the crowd up that has no energy and is so jet lagged. So that was a major bomb. And then another one was I was speaking to this graduation class, and it was me and my brother, and we had we need a remote that I can hold so we can do this slideshow, and we need mics that we can move around with, because that's the whole thing. It's like a conversation. We're up on stage, we're moving around, and as we're walking to the set, she's like, yeah, we don't have the remote. There's just one podium mic. Just like pretty much everything we asked for, they're just like, no, as we're walking to the stage. Yeah. And then it's also like in a small town, and we're young at this point, like we have a couple fans, but like half the people are like, who the hell are these guys?
Right.
Like, what is going on?
And why do they look so unprepared?
Yeah. And it was just like, then we kind of just like wore that. And I think we were supposed to speak for like 40 minutes. I think we did like 17. And we're like, good job. Congratulations on graduating grade 12. We'll see you later. Yeah. Like those are my two big bombs, kind of outside my control a little bit.
What did you learn from what did you learn from those? But more specifically, what did you learn about yourself in that moment when you had in your mind this was going to happen a certain way, and as you're about to go do the thing, you're basically given new information that says, hey, half of what you were going to do is not going to work anymore. Now you have to adapt on the fly. Go.
You just jump on the grenade. Sometimes, like, I don't know if you feel this way, but like sometimes it's just gonna suck.
Yeah,
it just do be like that. Like you can prepare all that stuff, and like I like to. I think I'm pretty good at thinking on my feet. Like I'm pretty quick, Like I can tap dance, I can vamp for like a little while, but like sometimes no vamping will ever get you out. Sometimes you just have to like, I don't
especially
know.
40 minutes.
Yeah, I play hockey. Like sometimes you just got to block a shot and it's gonna suck.
Yeah,
there's just some like snowboarding is the exact same. Like you sometimes you're just gonna take a hit. Yeah, and you just got to understand that. Like that's the snowboard analogy. Peaks and valleys.
Peaks and valleys. Yeah, that's a good one.
What about you? What's your worst bomb? Have you ever bombed?
Yeah. I had to give a talk to. I worked briefly with the Children's Aid Society, where they asked me to come and speak to a group of teenagers. Okay. And these are teenagers that come from generally difficult homes. Okay. And I wanted to be able to speak to them, but at the same time knowing that, hey, like I don't have the experiences they have, so I can only appear as someone who's trying to understand them. Yep. I don't want to appear as someone who's pretending like, hey, I totally get what's happening to you.
I know how you feel. It's like
it's hard. And I got nothing from them. Okay. Just blank stares. Yeah. Teenagers who are already in a difficult situation, who are not really like, who are you, Samir? Why are you even here?
Yeah, who the heck is this guy?
Yeah. And that, it's funny because when I left that talk, interestingly, I was told that the adults in the room were like, that was great, thank you. Yeah. But the people I was there to speak to they gave me nothing. Yep. And when I left, I remember sitting in the car for a moment and thinking to myself, I just bombed that. Yeah. And I'm the worst speaker on the planet. And then I caught myself and said, okay, Samir, you're actually making it about you in that moment.
Yes.
Right?
Great point.
This is very much just you drawing out an insecurity because you were hoping for validation from someone else. Yeah. And you didn't get it, and now you're reacting to the fact that you didn't get this external validation, and now you're sitting in your car for what now is 10 minutes talking to yourself, basically saying you didn't get what you wanted, and now you're moping about it.
Yeah.
And so I had to take a moment and go, okay, here's why that didn't work, right? I can tell you now, and I've done talks with high schools here in Toronto, where I've gotten similar experiences, but I've been able to continue forward without it affecting me as much, especially during the actual act of talking.
Yes, that's the key right there, I think.
And that was the biggest bomb that Children's Aid Society, that was my biggest bomb, but it taught me my most valuable lesson when speaking to a different or a very specific demographic.
Okay. That's really interesting. Yeah, sometimes I've been guilty of that, is you like look in the crowd and you're like, I'm not getting much, and you start to like give it way more.
No, yeah.
Yeah, and you're like, it's not matching the
and
energy.
now it's phony.
And
people can see that, because for up to that point you were maybe here, and now suddenly you're just up here, and they're like, either start up there or stay here.
100%. Yeah, that's so interesting. Also, okay, that has got to be one of the most hostile
it was hard.
places to walk into and be like, hey everyone, what's going on?
Yeah. It was hard. And again, I think it's because of the nature of the types of talks I deliver.
Yeah.
Where I'm often in a room where I'm trying to tell people that, hey, dealing with your mental health is not a problem. It's actually better you do. People who've been dealing with their own trauma and emotional roller coasters and all these things. And it's not like I'm walking into a corporate office of people who are like happy to be there and going like, hey, tell me about new processes. It's like, no, I'm here to tell you that it's okay to not be okay. And let's get deep and emotional here.
Yeah.
And so that's often like there's resistance in those rooms.
For sure.
Quite often.
Yes, there has to be.
Oh, yeah. Especially when you're talking to other men.
Yep.
Which it's a whole other thing.
It's a tough vibe sometimes to break that down.
I got to ask you, because you're, in addition to the snowboarding, in addition to the broadcasting piece, you do a lot of work with partners. And tell me, like, the whole reason we're even having this conversation is because you're doing a partnership with Wealth Simple.
Yeah.
And I'm always a big proponent of financial literacy and financial understanding, because we're never taught that in schools.
Facts.
And we all struggle with it. And by the time we figure out and understand that, hey, interest is actually bad, you're already dealing with interest.
Yeah.
Why is that partnership important to you?
So I was so lucky when I was like 21 or 22 in my kind of snowboarding. We don't really have coaches, right? You're kind of going on a crew with maybe some older snowboarders, and you're going to film like for a video. And I became really good friends with a guy named Matt Belzo, very talented snowboarder, and kind of like a mentor to me, and taught me tons of stuff on the board, but he like taught me more stuff off the snowboard in terms of like, hey, get your finances correct. Like, look into maybe getting some real estate here. And at that young age, that's not like a super sexy thing to do, like 21, you're not like thinking about your RRSP or whatever. So he was the one who like kind of really put that in front of me and then like spelled it out. Cause as you said, I didn't know anything about that. Right. Yeah. So like Matt Belzer, there's a quote, I just love this quote so much. And I always think about it. It's not timing the market, it's time in the market. And at 21, he was like, get your stuff together. And now that I'm a little bit older, I want to like, not just to younger people, to literally every Canadian ever, is like, hey, think about, what a couple years from now looks like for you. And what do you want it to look like, right? It's RSP season right now. Well Simple is matching 2% of eligible RSP contributions, which is huge. And then what I really love about this is, like, enjoy your life now too. So they're giving free lift tickets away for people that transfer over. So that's like kind of the message that I was like, yo, I really agree with this, because there's nothing worse than like what we talked about, burning out or going so hard into one thing and then like kind of regretting or missing out on something. I like that balance is like how I build my snowboard career. And then like financially, you got to have a little bit of balance. Like, you got to enjoy your life, but you also have to save. You have to think ahead, right?
Which is it seems to be a very common thing, especially with athletes that I speak to, where there's so much focus on what they're doing in their profession, and oftentimes when you start to see these brand partnerships and apparel partnerships and all of these big contracts and things like that, you start to think you're invincible, and you spend more than you make, and you suddenly find yourself, and we see it all the time. We see professional athletes who've made millions over their career suddenly declare bankruptcy because they've got no financial literacy
all the time.
Yeah.
And that should not be the case in any way, shape, or form. Like, just needs like one mentor or like one person to be that people listen to, just be like, hey, here's how you should do it. And like, also, I'm sitting here with a microphone in front of me. I've made every single mistake in the book. I am not like a financial savvy guy. I literally know consistency and balance. That's the things I look back on and I'm like, damn, that was actually pretty smart, and that's all I want to say to people is like, yo, contribute to your RSP, contribute to your TFSA, like, make a plan, have a work back. It's very simple. It doesn't take long. There's benefits, as I mentioned, from Well Simple. Like, just do it, because in like 5 years from now, 10 years from now, whatever it is, you're gonna be so. Nobody's ever saved a bunch of money and been like, damn, that sucked. Like not one person ever, you know, like nobody's ever said that. So yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to pass down. You know, as you get a little bit old, I'm, you know, in my 30s, so it's like.
Do you have kids?
No, I don't. Do you? No. I feel
hoping to one day.
Yeah. It's like, it's just really important. It's especially like, it's really easy to think in the now, but balance. How I built my snowboard career, it's how, like, the only good thing I've ever done. Yeah.
I wanted to ask, because I saw the tattoo on the forearm. I think it said dad.
Oh, yeah. I got the mom and dad.
Mom and dad.
Yeah, I got mom and dad.
I saw just dad because I guess the thing.
Yeah. My mom hates tattoos, and this was the funniest one because she was like, she was a nurse, and she worked in prison, so that she'd see gnarly tattoos. Just hated tattoos. And then this one, I was like, well, it's for you, so.
Can't be mad.
Do you hate it? Yeah.
I have my parents' birth years in Roman numerals.
Oh, that's
here.
sick. Yeah. Are they fans of tattoos?
No.
Okay.
Actually, you know what? They are now. At the time, they weren't.
They weren't?
Yeah.
Okay.
But what's the biggest lesson you've learned from your parents?
Biggest lesson I've learned from my parents? Yeah, you got good questions, man. I like to be quick, but this one is the biggest lesson. I've learned tons of lessons. Extremely supportive. My mom, I would say, I kind of got forced to finish high school. I think I probably could have dropped out of high school and snowboarded a little bit earlier. She was very, like, her mom was a teacher. School was very, very important to her. It was kind of like we were really butting heads in terms of like, you have to finish high school, and I think I can be a snowboarder, blah, blah, blah. So that was, I'm happy I did it, but that was, we were kind of butting heads. So I'm happy that I did that, but I also learned like you got to kind of make decisions for yourself at a certain point. Because my parents my mom wants the best for me. She wants me to educate and be set up, but like I'm also me, you know, like I know what I'm capable of and stuff like that. And then from my dad, a lesson that I think is one of the greatest lessons for anybody who has kids in sports: set them up, take them to every sport they want to do. Don't tell them how to do it. Don't push them. Like, the reason I love snowboarding is because there weren't coaches yelling at you. You weren't getting bag skated. My dad just loved it. He wasn't there like, hey, you got to do a better back three. He's like, take you to the hill and have fun. Yeah. Right. So there's like, I think
the fun element.
The fun element is the most important. That's like why we gravitate. It was the most fun. Nobody's yelling at you or telling you what to do. So that's, you know, that's freedom.
And I think that's so powerful because there was a window of time in my life pre-pandemic where I was a scout in the Ontario Hockey League.
Okay.
And
what team?
The Mississauga Steelheads.
Okay.
They're now in Brampton, but
the battalion now?
No, they're still Steelheads.
Oh, they are still okay.
Just in Brampton. North Bay is the battalion team.
Oh, okay.
So the biggest shock was seeing how parents would yell at 15-year-olds.
It's the craziest thing in the world.
And the way they would yell at each other.
Yep.
The way they'd yell at refs and coaches, chase kids into locker rooms. I'm like, these are grown adults behaving more like children than the children on the ice.
Yeah.
And it was insane to watch. And I think it's a very big problem for youth sports in general, the way parents behave.
Preach.
Yeah.
It is the most hot, like, that's a very usually level-headed person losing their mind.
Yeah.
In the most embarrassing way.
Yep.
Like, I totally agree with you. I think that is a huge problem. I think it's getting better from what it used to be. I think maybe.
Yeah, to some degree. I mean, by the time I walked away from it all, there were still moments where I was like, oh yeah, the frequency had decreased, but the intensity of it when it still happened was still like
the same.
The whole arena would stop and just stare at this one person screaming at the top of their lungs.
Yeah. Man. That I get shivers. It sends shivers out my spine.
I'm saying that story because you said your dad prioritized the fact that it had to be fun.
Yeah, and he never. Yeah, that's that. Like, he set us up with, like, you know, I played soccer and basketball and volleyball and
which
football,
is also important that you do multiple sports.
So important. I can't stress that enough. Wayne Gretzky was like, hey, yeah, play baseball in the summer, play lacrosse in the summer. Like, yeah do everything outside of your sport because that's actually going to make you better and a better athlete.
Absolutely.
But yeah, that was to get back to your question, that was one of my biggest lessons was like, provide somebody with the tools and watch them use the tools how they want to and like grow and learn, as opposed to being like, no, this is how you have to do it. And I think that's one lesson I learned. I think the best one. Yeah.
Craig, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. That was
great.
really, really fun and very informative.
No, this was great for me. And I remembered that we did have another Olympian in Donovan Bailey, only one of the greatest runners of all time. I'm sorry, Donovan.
I love Donovan Bailey. You're the best. Let's get a tequila.
Yeah. But Craig, seriously, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. Love the work that you're doing. I'll root for you on TV even when you bomb. But I won't even know that you did. So that's the
I'll
silver
wink.
lining.
You'll know.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming through.
Thank you, Samir.
Thank you, everybody.